Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! As the sun reached its peak in the late afternoon sky, Dorian found himself wandering through the vibrant fashion district. The lively streets mirroring the chaotic creativity it was renowned for. Each step towards Aunt Caroline's studio was a battle between his intrigue and a growing unease. Her reputation as an avant-garde designer and a character herself both fascinated and intimidated Dorian, making this visit a peculiar blend of anticipation and nervousness. Pushing open the heavy glass door, Dorian was immediately enveloped by the familiar scent of fabric and perfume. "Darling!" Caroline's voice rang out as she swept towards him, arms outstretched. Her flowing silk caftan billowed behind her, a riot of colors and patterns that somehow worked together in perfect harmony. "Hi, Auntie," Dorian replied, accepting her enthusiastic embrace. "What's this big emergency you called me about?" Caroline's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh, it's simply dreadful. My usual model canceled at the last minute, and I have a showing for my new collection this evening. Whatever shall I do?" She pressed the back of her hand to her forehead in an exaggerated gesture of distress. Dorian felt a twinge of suspicion. "And you called me because..." "Because, my dear nephew, you're going to save the day." Caroline clapped her hands together. "You're just the right height and build. With a little makeup and the right accessories, you'll be perfect." Realization dawned on Dorian. "Wait, you want me to model? Your women's collection?" He shook his head emphatically. "No way, Auntie. I can't do that." Caroline's lower lip jutted out in an exaggerated pout. "But darling, you simply must! My entire reputation is at stake. Just think of all those times I covered for you when you were sneaking out as a teenager. You owe me!" Dorian sighed, knowing he was fighting a losing battle. His aunt had a way of getting what she wanted, and he did owe her for keeping his teenage escapades secret from his parents. "Fine," he conceded reluctantly. "But just this once, and nobody can know it was me." Caroline's face lit up with delight. Of course! Now, let's get you ready. We don't have a moment to lose." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Dorian was whisked away to a private dressing room where a team of stylists descended upon him. His beard was shaved clean, his skin exfoliated and moisturized. Subtle makeup was applied, enhancing his features without looking overdone. A long, chestnut-colored wig was carefully styled and secured to his head. As the transformation progressed, Dorian found himself becoming increasingly intrigued. He'd never given much thought to the intricacies of women's fashion or beauty routines, but now he was experiencing it firsthand. The attention to detail was fascinating, and he couldn't help but admire the skill of the stylists as they worked their magic. Finally, it was time for the dress. Caroline entered the room, carrying a garment bag with reverence. "This, my dear, is the pièce de résistance of my new collection," she announced, unzipping the bag with a flourish. Dorian's breath caught in his throat as the dress was revealed. It was a stunning creation of midnight blue silk, with delicate silver embroidery cascading down the bodice like a shower of stars. The skirt flowed in elegant folds, promising to swish enticingly with every movement. "It's beautiful," Dorian murmured, reaching out to touch the fabric. Caroline beamed with pride. "I knew you'd appreciate it. Now, let's get you into it." With the help of the stylists, Dorian stepped into the dress. As it was zipped up, he felt a strange sense of anticipation building within him. The silk caressed his skin, cool and smooth, and the weight of the fabric settled around him like an embrace. Turn around, darling, Caroline instructed. Let's see the full effect. Dorian slowly turned to face the full-length mirror, and his jaw dropped. The person staring back at him was beautiful. The dress hugged his body in all the right places, creating the illusion of curves where there were none. The deep blue of the fabric made his skin glow, and the long, flowing hair framed his face perfectly. For a moment, he didn't recognize himself. It was as if a hidden part of his personality had suddenly been brought to the surface, revealed in all its glory. He felt right, in a way he couldn't quite explain. "Oh, Dorian," Caroline breathed, her eyes misting over. "You look absolutely stunning. I knew you'd be perfect." Dorian couldn't tear his eyes away from his reflection. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "This is incredible." Caroline squeezed his shoulder gently. "How do you feel, darling?" "I feel..." Dorian paused, searching for the right words. "I feel beautiful, powerful, like I could conquer the world in this dress." A knowing smile played across Caroline's lips. "That's exactly how every woman should feel in one of my creations. Now, are you ready to show the world?" Dorian took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. The nervousness he'd felt earlier had evaporated, replaced by a surge of confidence. "I'm ready," he declared. The studio had been transformed for the evening's event. Soft lighting created an intimate atmosphere, and champagne flowed freely as Caroline's most discerning clients and friends mingled, eagerly anticipating the reveal of her latest collection. Dorian waited backstage, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. He could hear the murmur of conversation beyond the curtain, punctuated by the occasional tinkle of laughter or clink of glasses. "Remember, darling," Caroline whispered, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're not just wearing the dress, you're embodying it. Let the fabric move with you. Let it become a part of you." Dorian nodded, taking a deep breath. As the music started and Caroline stepped out to introduce her collection, he closed his eyes, focusing on the feel of the silk against his skin, the gentle sway of the skirt around his legs. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," Caroline's voice rang out, "I present to you the star of my new collection, Midnight Serenade." That was his cue. Dorian stepped out from behind the curtain, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed upon him as he began to walk the improvised runway. With each step, Dorian felt a new sense of grace and poise flow through him. The dress moved with him, the embroidered stars catching the light and seeming to dance across the fabric. He reached the end of the runway and paused, allowing the audience to take in the full effect of the gown. As he turned to make his way back, a smattering of applause broke out, quickly swelling into enthusiastic cheers and exclamations of admiration. Dorian couldn't help but smile, basking in the warmth of the audience's approval. The rest of the show passed in a blur of costume changes and applause. Dorian modeled several more of Caroline's creations, each one making him feel more confident and alive than the last. There was a sleek, emerald green sheath dress that made him feel like a 1940s film star, a playful pink cocktail dress that brought out a flirtatious side he never knew he had, and a dramatic red ball gown that made him feel like royalty. As the final notes of music faded and Dorian took his last bow alongside Caroline, he felt a strange mixture of elation and sadness. The evening had been a revelation, awakening feelings and desires he'd never experienced before. The after-party was in full swing, with Caroline's guests eager to mingle with the designer and her stunning new model. Dorian, still dressed in the midnight blue gown, found himself surrounded by admirers. "Darling, you were absolutely magnificent," gushed an elegant older woman in a Chanel suit. "Where has Caroline been hiding you all this time?" Dorian smiled, falling easily into the role he'd created. "Oh, I'm new to all this," he replied, his voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "But Caroline's designs make it easy to feel beautiful." "Well, you certainly looked like a natural up there," commented a distinguished-looking gentleman. "Have you considered pursuing modeling as a career?" Before Dorian could respond, Caroline appeared at his side, slipping an arm around his waist. Now, she chided playfully. "Don't go trying to poach my new muse. This one's all mine." As the party continued, Dorian found himself swept up in conversations about fashion, art, and culture. He was surprised at how easily he adapted to this new persona, offering opinions on designers and trends with a confidence he never knew he possessed. But as the night wore on and the champagne flowed, Dorian began to feel a growing sense of unease. He was enjoying himself, perhaps too much. The line between performance and reality was starting to blur, and he wasn't sure how to process the emotions swirling within him. Excusing himself from a group of admirers, Dorian made his way to a quiet corner of the studio. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. "Are you all right, darling?" Caroline's voice startled him, and he opened his eyes to find her watching him with concern. Dorian forced a smile. "I'm fine, Auntie. Just a bit overwhelmed, I guess." Caroline's expression softened. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it? Discovering a new side of yourself can be exhilarating, but it can also be frightening." Dorian looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come now," Caroline said gently. "I've known you since you were a child, Dorian. I've always sensed there was more to you than met the eye. Tonight, I saw you truly come alive in a way I've never seen before." Dorian felt a lump forming in his throat. "I don't know what's happening to me, Auntie," he whispered. "I've never felt like this before. It's like I've been wearing a mask my whole life, and tonight I finally took it off." Caroline took his hands in hers, her eyes filled with understanding. "There's nothing wrong with exploring different facets of your identity, Dorian. Gender isn't always as black and white as society would have us believe. Some people find that they don't fit neatly into one category or another, and that's perfectly okay." Dorian felt a weight lifting from his shoulders at his aunt's words. "So, you don't think I'm weird? Or confused?" "Darling, the only thing that would be weird is if you tried to deny this part of yourself," Caroline said firmly. "Life is too short to hide who you truly are. If wearing these clothes and embracing your feminine side makes you happy, then that's what you should do." Dorian nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I think I'd like to explore this more, but I'm not sure how to go about it." Caroline's face lit up. "Well, you've come to the right place, my dear. We'll start slowly. Perhaps some androgynous pieces for everyday wear. See how you feel. And of course, you're always welcome to come here and try on anything you like." As they talked, Dorian felt a sense of excitement building within him. The future suddenly seemed full of possibilities he'd never considered before. The party was winding down, guests saying their goodbyes and exchanging air kisses, Dorian made his way back to the dressing room, ready to transform back into his usual self. But as he stood before the mirror, preparing to remove the wig, he hesitated. The person looking back at him wasn't just a character he'd played for the night. It was a part of him that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. He touched the silky fabric of the dress, remembering the way it had made him feel. Powerful, beautiful, authentic. With a deep breath, Dorian made a decision. He wouldn't be taking off this new identity like a costume. Instead, he would be incorporating it into his life, allowing both his masculine and feminine sides to coexist and flourish. As he finally began to change out of the dress, Dorian felt a sense of peace settle over him. The night had been more than just a favor for his aunt. It had been the beginning of a journey of self-discovery, and while he knew there would be challenges ahead, he was excited to see where this new path would lead. Leaving the studio that night, Dorian carried with him not just memories of an extraordinary evening, but also a newfound understanding of himself. The streets of the city seemed different somehow, full of promise and potential. As he walked home, the cool night air caressing his face, Dorian smiled to himself. Life, he realized, was about to get a lot more interesting. In the weeks that followed, Dorian found himself spending more and more time at Caroline's studio. What had started as a one-time modeling gig had blossomed into a genuine passion for fashion and self-expression. Caroline, true to her word, had begun introducing him to more androgynous styles, helping him find ways to incorporate elements of femininity into his everyday wardrobe. At first, the changes were subtle. A silk scarf here, a fitted blazer there. Dorian experimented with different fabrics and cuts, discovering how clothing could be used to express different facets of his personality. He found himself paying more attention to the way fabrics felt against his skin, the way certain colors made him feel more confident or relaxed. As his comfort grew, so did his boldness. He started wearing light makeup to work, just a touch of mascara and tinted lip balm at first, gradually adding subtle eyeshadow and a hint of blush. To his surprise, his colleagues barely seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't comment. One Saturday afternoon, Dorian decided to take a bigger step. He'd been eyeing a beautiful floral sundress in Caroline's latest collection, and with her encouragement, he decided to wear it out in public. His heart pounded as he stepped out onto the busy street, but as he walked through the city, he realized that most people barely gave him a second glance. Those who did notice often smiled appreciatively, complimenting his outfit or asking where he'd gotten such a lovely dress. The positive reactions bolstered his confidence, and by the time he met Caroline for lunch at their favorite cafe, he was feeling more comfortable in his own skin than he ever had before. "Well, don't you look absolutely radiant?" Caroline exclaimed as he approached their table. She stood to greet him, air-kissing both cheeks before holding him at arm's length to admire his outfit. "That dress was made for you, darling." Dorian couldn't help but beam. "Thanks, Auntie. I feel amazing in it." As they settled in to peruse the menu, Caroline leaned forward conspiratorially. "So, tell me everything. How does it feel to be out and about, embracing your true self?" Dorian took a sip of water, gathering his thoughts.
"It's liberating,"
he said finally. "I feel like I can breathe easier, like I'm not constantly trying to fit into some predetermined mold of what a man should be. But it's also a little scary. I keep wondering if people are judging me, or if I'm going to run into someone I know who won't understand." Caroline reached across the table to squeeze his hand. That's perfectly natural, my dear. Remember, you're challenging societal norms that have been in place for centuries. It takes courage to be true to yourself in the face of potential judgment. But I want you to know how proud I am of you for taking this step. Dorian felt a warmth spread through his chest at his aunt's words. I couldn't have done it without you, Auntie. Your support means everything to me. They spent the rest of the lunch discussing Dorian's journey over the past few weeks, from his initial trepidation to his growing confidence. Caroline offered advice on dealing with potential negative reactions and suggested some LGBTQ-friendly spaces where Dorian might feel comfortable exploring his new identity further. As they were finishing their dessert, Caroline's eyes suddenly lit up.
Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I've been invited to showcase my latest collection at a charity fashion show next month, and I want you to be my star model again.
Dorian nearly choked on his tiramisu.
What? Auntie, I don't know if I'm ready for that. It's one thing to wear a dress to lunch, but to be up on a runway in front of hundreds of people?
Caroline waved away his concerns.
Nonsense. You were born for the spotlight, darling, and think of the impact you could have. Seeing someone like you, confidently embracing both masculinity and femininity, could be incredibly powerful for others who are struggling with their own identity.
Dorian bit his lip, considering. The idea was terrifying, but also exhilarating. And his aunt had a point. If his presence on that runway could help even one person feel more comfortable in their own skin, wouldn't it be worth it? All right, he said finally. I'll do it. But you have to promise to help me prepare. I want to do your designs justice. Caroline clapped her hands in delight. Of course, my dear. We'll have you runway ready in no time. Oh, this is going to be simply marvelous. As they left the cafe, Dorian felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside him. He was about to take another huge step in his journey of self-discovery, and while it was daunting, he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Caroline threw herself into creating new designs specifically for Dorian, blending masculine and feminine elements in ways that celebrated his unique identity. There were tailored suits with unexpected pops of color and texture, flowing gowns that emphasized his broad shoulders, while creating the illusion of curves, and edgy, gender-bending ensembles that defied easy categorization. Dorian spent hours practicing his walk, learning to move gracefully in heels, and to carry himself with confidence no matter what he was wearing. He worked with makeup artists to perfect looks that enhanced his features without obscuring his natural appearance. And through it all, he found himself falling more in love with this new aspect of his personality. The night of the fashion show arrived all too quickly. Backstage was a flurry of activity, models being primped and prepped, designers making last-minute adjustments, and staff rushing to ensure everything was in place. Dorian stood in front of a mirror, taking deep breaths as a stylist put the finishing touches on his hair and makeup. His first outfit was a stunning tuxedo-inspired gown. The top was a crisp white shirt and black blazer, impeccably tailored to his form. But from the waist down, it transformed into a flowing black skirt with a daring thigh-high slit. The look was completed with strappy heels and a bow-tie choker. Are you ready, darling? Caroline appeared behind him, her eyes shining with pride and excitement. Dorian met her gaze in the mirror and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, she said, squeezing his shoulders. You're not just modeling clothes out there. You're making a statement. You're showing the world that it's possible to be true to every aspect of yourself. With those words ringing in his ears, Dorian took his place in line. The music started, the lights dimmed, and the show began. As he waited for his turn, He could hear the crowd's reactions, gasps of admiration, enthusiastic applause, and excited murmurs. Finally, it was his moment. Dorian stepped out onto the runway, and the world seemed to fall away. The lights were blinding, the music pulsing through his body. He moved with a grace and confidence he'd never known he possessed, owning every step, every turn, every pose. As he reached the end of the runway, he paused, allowing the audience to take in the full effect of Caroline's creation. There was a moment of hushed awe, and then the applause began. It started slowly, but quickly swelled into a roaring crescendo. Dorian could see people standing, cheering, their faces alight with admiration and support. In that moment, any lingering doubts he'd had vanished. This wasn't just about fashion or self-expression. It was about challenging perceptions, breaking down barriers, and showing that beauty and identity could be fluid and multifaceted. As he made his way backstage for his next change, Dorian caught sight of Carolyn. She was wiping away tears, her face beaming with pride. He blew her a kiss before disappearing behind the curtain, ready to transform into his next breathtaking look. The rest of the show passed in a blur of costume changes and thunderous applause. Each time Dorian stepped onto the runway, he felt more alive, more himself. He showcased Caroline's designs with a confidence and flair that had the audience captivated. For the finale, Dorian wore what Caroline had dubbed her masterpiece, a shimmering gown that seemed to change color with every movement. From one angle, it appeared a deep, masculine blue. From another, a soft, feminine pink. The bodice was adorned with intricate beadwork that created a pattern reminiscent of a butterfly's wings, a symbol of transformation and beauty. As he made his final walk, Dorian felt a sense of profound gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for his aunt's unwavering support, for the opportunity to explore this side of himself, and for the acceptance he'd found, not just from the audience, but from within himself. The after-party was a jubilant affair. Fashion critics, celebrities, and industry insiders all clamored to speak with Caroline and her stunning new model. Dorian found himself surrounded by admirers, fielding questions about his experience and offering words of encouragement to those who confided their own struggles with identity and self-expression. As the night wore on, Dorian found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowd. He made his way to a balcony overlooking the city, the cool night air, a welcome respite from the heat of the party. "There you are." Caroline's voice came from behind him. She joined him at the railing, handing him a glass of champagne.
I thought you might need a breather.
Dorian smiled gratefully, taking a sip of the bubbly liquid. "Thanks, Auntie, for everything." Caroline wrapped an arm around his waist, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You were magnificent out there, darling. Absolutely magnificent. How do you feel?" Dorian took a deep breath, considering the question. "I feel whole," he said finally. "Like I've finally found a way to express all the different parts of who I am. It's scary and exciting and overwhelming all at once." Caroline nodded understandingly. "That's the beauty of self-discovery, my dear. It's a journey that never truly ends. There will always be new aspects of yourself to explore, new ways to grow and change." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the twinkling lights of the city. Finally, Dorian turned to his aunt, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. "You've given me so much more than just beautiful clothes. You've helped me find myself. Caroline cupped his face in her hands, her own eyes misty. Oh, my darling boy. You've always had this beauty within you. I just helped you find a way to let it shine, and watching you blossom has been the greatest joy of my life. As they embraced, Dorian felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that his journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and likely some difficult conversations with friends and family, but he also knew that he had the strength and support to face whatever came his way. Stepping back onto the balcony, Dorian raised his glass in a toast.
To new beginnings,
he said. Caroline clinked her glass against his.
To being unapologetically, beautifully you, she replied.
As they sipped their champagne, Dorian looked out at the city once more. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities he'd never dreamed of. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely ready to embrace it all.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.